8 weeks talking about God's welcome table. And if we agree that we are called to love all the people, okay. If I put it there, no. Well, the problem is I need it up later. Okay, if I do it. Okay, if I try like this, can you hear me? Yeah. Cricket, can you hear me? Anybody else? Okay. I'll just use the teacher voice. If we agree that we are called to love all the people, we have to figure out how we're going to do that as a congregation and how we're going to do that as individuals. The Apostle Paul talks about how we should clothe ourselves. He does this in a couple of different places in the Bible. At one point, he talks about the whole armor of God. That's in Ephesians. And I have this cute little picture of the whole armor of God. But in Colossians, which is where I want to be today, he tells us that because we are chosen of God, that we ought to dress in a certain way. We're to clothe ourselves with different elements that follow the pattern of Christ so that we're all bound together by love. So let's hear these words from Colossians 3. As God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. Bear with one another, and if anyone has a complaint against another, forgive each other. Just as the Lord has forgiven you, so you must also forgive. Above all, clothe yourselves with love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. And let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, which indeed you are called into one body. And be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly. Teach and admonish one another with all wisdom. And with gratitude in your hearts, sing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs to God. And whatever you do, in word or in deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. The word of the Lord for the people of God. Let's pray. God of thanksgiving and grace, may my words and our thoughts together be acceptable to you. For you are the one that showers us with love, and you are the one who enables us to love others. In Christ's name, amen. Love is central to the gospel. Everything in the gospel. You can't live a Christian life without living a life that seeks to master the ability to love other people. And it's not always easy. But when Jesus asked what the greatest commandments were, his answer was love. Love God and love your neighbor as yourself. And all of these garments that Paul tells us about in this to the Colossian churches to clothe themselves, each one is nothing more than a simple expression of love. Compassion, for example, compassion is the ability to care for someone. The only way to truly care for someone is to love that person. If you don't love that person, then you don't care what happens to them. And in many ways, this Colossians text is a reflection of the text in 1 Corinthians 13. For instance, in verse 5, it says, love is not rude, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongdoing. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices in the truth, and love always protects. If you want to live the life as a follower of Jesus, you have to live a life of love. And one way to live a life of love is to have compassion. But Paul goes on from there, and he says, not just compassion, but also clothe yourselves with kindness. Have you ever heard that random acts of kindness? You know, we live in a world of random acts of violence. But in recent years, people have been using the phrase random acts of kindness. There was a movie a while back called Pay It Forward that was just so amazing. It could be as simple as letting somebody into traffic, sending a birthday card to somebody who's lonely, or just smiling at someone. I love going to a drive-thru. I'll be at Sonic or something, and there'll be a car behind me, and I'll just pay for theirs as well. Compassion is feeling love for someone. Kindness is doing something about it. In Matthew 25, Jesus talks about how God will separate people like a shepherd separates sheep from goats. And Jesus says that God will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left, and then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed. Take your inheritance. The kingdom is prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit." Then the righteous will answer, "Lord, when did we see you hungry or feed you? Or thirsty or give you something to drink? Or a stranger and invite you in? Or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we ever see you sick or in prison and go visit?" And the king will reply, "I tell the truth. Whatever you do this for the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you do it for me." Now I want you to contrast that with this little story I made. I was hungry, and you formed a humanities club to discuss my hunger. I was imprisoned, and you crept off quietly to your chapel and prayed for my release. I was naked, and in your mind you debated the morality of my appearance. I was sick, and you knelt and thanked God for your own health. I was homeless, and you preached to me of the spiritual shelter of the love of God. I was lonely, and you left me alone so that you could go pray for me. You seemed so close to God, but I'm still hungry and lonely and cold. Sounds like the goats to me. In other words, love needs more than feeling and compassion. It needs action. It needs kindness. Compassion and kindness are both expressions of love, but love has to have both. Paul tells us to clothe ourselves with certain items, and he goes on to describe this uniform of love. And can you imagine clothing yourself in a literal uniform and forgetting one part of it? If you don't have the whole uniform, you're not really in uniform. The Sunday football game right after 9/11. A man was asked to take part in the opening ceremony at an NFL game. It was the very first game after the attacks. And he was a chaplain in the U.S. Navy. And he was part of a larger group of military personnel taking part in the ceremony. Right before the game, they were having this ceremony. Television cameras zoomed in on him just at the moment that he gave his salute. He really looked sharp. But a little bit later in an interview, he said he panicked right before going out on the field. He was in the office area where they were waiting to take him out and follow someone, and he reached for his hat, and it wasn't there. He thought he put it to the table right next to him, and it wasn't there. He said the fear that went through his body was intense. That only took a moment for him to find that as somebody had taken his hat and put it up on a hook. But for a brief, painful moment, he was horrified that he'd lost part of his uniform. Imagine wearing the uniform as a follower of Christ, but forgetting to clothe yourselves with kindness. You can have all the compassion in the world, but if you don't show it with kindness, you're out of uniform. Next on our list in our wardrobe is humility. It's kind of hard sometimes not to boast, not to be proud, not to be rude, not to be self-seeking. Humility is knowing your place in life and it's putting God first and then putting others before yourself. Gail Sayers was a football player who wrote a book called I Am Third. They made a movie out of it. Anybody know the name of the movie?
Brian Song.
Brian Song. Every time I see that movie, I ball my eyes out. But Gail Sayers had saw that in a coach's office somewhere. I am third. Strange is, in an athletic facility, you would normally expect to see something that you're first. You first. Go. But instead, the sign said, I'm third. He said when he asked the coach about it, the explanation was God is first and others are second and I come third. Knowing your place in the universe. God first and placing others before yourself. And if you do not have humility, you're out of uniform. 1 Corinthians 13 says that love is not rude. Well, if you're not rude, you're gentle, you're meek. In Philippians, he says, let your gentleness be evident to everyone. Most of us don't allow our gentleness to be evident at all. Especially while driving, I have trouble with that. People racing all the way up the shoulder and trying to cut in before me. And I've been waiting in line for 20 minutes. But if we clothe ourselves in rudeness, we're out of uniform. We haven't abided by the rules that this dress code that Paul is giving us. Now, getting back to the man in the opening ceremony, it was a Dolphins game. And the hat, for the Navy officer is really a cool looking hat. But what if he, say, couldn't find it, so he puts on an Army hat? Or a highway patrolman hat, with the big brim? Or a firefighter's hat? They're cool hats too, but they're not a Navy officer's hat. If you'd worn anything other than the hat that went with that uniform, people would have noticed that and they wouldn't have noticed anything else that day. They wouldn't have known what words he spoke or that he saluted. They were like, what's wrong with him? That's not. Why is he wearing that? If you clothe yourself in rudeness, people will notice that and not notice anything else. They will not see Christ in you. They will not notice any acts of kindness that you've done. They will not care how compassionate you have been. If you are rude, that's what they're going to see. Paul tells us to clothe yourself with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and finally with patience. I want you to picture in your mind a person you have been patient with. Hopefully everyone can picture at least one person that they've had to be patient with. Get a good picture of that person. Someone who's difficult to be with, but you're still patient with that person. Someone who is demanding or inefficient, but you're patient with that person. Probably it's somebody you love. A child, a spouse, a parent, a best friend, somebody you work with. You're patient with those people because that's what you're called to do. And again, it's not easy. And you can't clothe yourselves with love, though, without clothing yourselves with patience. If you want to be a follower of Jesus, then you have to abide by the dress code. Clothe yourselves with compassion and kindness and humility and gentleness and patience. And remember Paul's final remarks. He says, above all, clothe yourselves with love, which binds everything together. I've read a lot of theologians over the years. And one of my favorite theologians spent his entire career showing what this means. How to clothe yourselves with compassion and kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience, and above all, love. I want to show you a short clip this morning. There are thousands I could have shown you, but there's one. This theologian was Mr. Rogers. I have to get over there to that. Okay, can you move it to the next one? There we go. There was this article in CNN about Mr. Rogers yesterday, and I know part of it's because the movie's out. Is it out yet? I haven't got to see it yet. I disagreed with the headline of the article that I read. It called Mr. Rogers a televangelist to children. Missionary to children, I'll buy. Theologian for children. He never preached preaching. He just taught kids that you're supposed to be respectful and love everyone. He was the first person to be on TV, and we're talking in the early 70s and late 60s, early 70s, putting his feet in a swimming pool with an African-American man, Francois Clothe.
Right after MLK was assassinated.
Right after MLK was assassinated. Respectful of everyone. He is such a good example of clothing. So I guess clothing yourself in all this is a red sweater. Oh, he was wearing a blue one there. But what struck me from this article, on his deathbed, his wife told what his last words were. He turned to his wife, and referencing Matthew 25 that we talked about earlier, he said, "Am I a sheep? Wanting to know if he'd done enough." Imagine what would happen if every person in the world followed Reverend Fred Rogers' example on how to live. He was a Presbyterian minister who kept his ordination current all the way to the end, but his ministry was to help children grow and understand and be loved. Imagine your home or your family or your workplace or school. If you were clothed with compassion and kindness and humility and gentleness and patience and binding it all together with love, what would the world look like if everybody was doing that? I want to challenge us as individuals. I want to challenge us as a congregation to focus on showering God's love to everyone. Let's look for opportunities to administer random acts of kindness. Let's figure out a way to really make a difference in our community and in Oklahoma City and in helping the poor and the needy. And we're doing a lot of that with Chain Reaction and Refuge Fellowship. I don't know if Probably not everybody knows, but I come here to Perry about every other week, maybe every 3 weeks, and pick up a load of clothes, usually 500 to 700 pounds of clothes, from a little ministry that Dad's on the board of over here called Operation Blessing. And they get more clothes in than they can give away in a town of 5,000. And so I pick up a load of clothes from them every other week or so and drive it in for the Jesus House. They were throwing these clothes away. And Dad got on the board and found out they were throwing them away. And he said, no, there are homeless people that could be wearing these clothes. I read 2 articles recently. One was a little book that I bought from the article that I read. First one was the obituary of a deceased church. And it speaks of the church dying because all it thought was inward, how are we going to survive? How are we going to survive? How are we going to survive? Instead of what it could be doing in the community. The other one was on Facebook this week that I came across, and I sent it to a few of you. And it was the study that said churches that are open to all people have more members and fewer closures than other progressive churches. People that are willing to say, we love all the people. And it can't just be a slogan, it has to be real. We have a welcoming table. But we have to make sure we let people know that they're welcome. We sang earlier that we were one people of God, where no one is a stranger, where all will find forgiveness. Come take the bread, come drink the wine, come share the Lord. The leadership of First Christian Church are making plans, and we're going to be talking about those more in December. Making plans to move forward as a congregation. Do we have our clothes ready to wear? Are we ready to share God's love in this world in a real way? We are God's chosen ones, holy and beloved. Let's find real ways to be relevant in our community and real ways to share God's love inside and outside of the church building. Build us a table and tear down the wall. Christ is our hope. There's room for us all.